Hello, Blythe, Edie, Joe, Jack, Callum, Cadence, Lucy, Orion, and anyone else who's listening. Welcome to Story Time. Today's story is a story I'm going to tell you about something from my childhood. I grew up in the panhandle of Florida, near a town called Pensacola, and we were on the cliff above Pensacola Bay. So we walked down 50 stairs to get to the beach, and we swam on the beach, and we had a dock. We jumped off the dock. We had so much fun swimming all summer long. Our mother was worried about us getting too much sun, so we weren't allowed to swim between 12 o'clock in the afternoon and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So those 3 hours we had to play inside or do chores inside, or we would play games like Monopoly, that kind of thing. In the morning, sometimes we would walk down the beach and go crabbing, and then we could have crab meat for our lunch. It was really a magical childhood. Now, across the bay from us was the Pensacola Naval Air Station. And there's a very famous team of pilots called the Blue Angels that's their home. That's their home base. So they did lots of practicing above the water where we were swimming all the time. Now, there is something called Morse code. It was an old way of communicating, but I think sometimes it's still used now. It was developed by a man named Morse, and it's sounds, and there's a whole Morse alphabet so that information could be sent more quickly. So there are dashes and dots for each letter, and I'll put on a video to show you what Morse code sounds like. But in international Morse code, there is something called the SOS signal. S is 3 dots, an O is 3 dashes, and then an S is 3 dots. And it became internationally known as an emergency signal. So when people say something about SOS, then they're asking for someone to rescue them. It was used a lot with ships and over the air communication. So when planes might fly over a boat, and it could give this Morse code message SOS, and that means rescue us. Well, when I was a little girl, I thought that we could make the pilots for the Blue Angels think that we needed rescuing. And so I asked my brother Pat to help me make a huge SOS in the sand on the beach where we played out of dried seaweed. So we drew the giant SOS in the sand, and then we put the seaweed in the S, in the outline of the S and the O and the S. And the pilots would fly over the beach, and sometimes they would fly kind of close to us because they were used to seeing us out there playing. But I was convinced that we were going to make those pilots think that there was an emergency at our house, that we were stranded and needed rescuing. But you know what's funny about that is that there were houses all around us, because there were lots of people who lived on that cliff, and people lived all down that beach. So silly Nani, I don't remember how old I was. It was my brother Pat who reminded me of that just recently, because he saw a rescue happen in Australia, or on a Pacific island, where some people were stranded on this island, and they wrote in the sand SOS, and they were rescued. So that is a funny story about my childhood that I had totally forgotten until my brother Pat reminded me of how I would convince him to make an SOS sign on the beach, and then wonder, did those pilots really think that we were stranded and needed rescuing? And I bet the pilots thought it was pretty funny. So that's the end of that story. This is what it looks like when someone writes SOS in the sand. Now, I made ours distinct by filling it with dried seaweed so it would show up in the white sand even better. And I'm sure that the pilots thought it was pretty funny. So I'm going to show you some pictures of the SOS alphabet, and I'll show you a video, a very brief video where you can hear SOS signals being sent, and then you can imagine Nani when she was like 5 or 6 years old, thinking that we were going to make the pilots of the Blue Angels think that we were stranded right on our very own beach. Bye-bye. I hope you like this story. And think of what amazing signals you could send in this day and age of the pandemic. What you might be able to make in your yard, or draw with chalk on your driveway. Who knows who might get those messages and what they might think about the person who sent it.
So, see, this is the International Morse code, and you can see how there's dashes and dots for different letters, and you can see that the S has 3 dots and the O has 3 dashes, and then it creates a sound so that it's very distinctive and can send an emergency signal very quickly if somebody gets a message that somebody needs help in a hurry when they're on the water or in the air. So this is a picture of SOS drawn in the sand, and now this is the what SOS sounds like when it's being sent through the airwaves. So again, this is a picture of SOS written in the sand, but remember my idea was to fill the S and the O and the S with dried seaweed so it would stand out even more. And now this is a video of those people being rescued from an island because they wrote SOS in the sand. So I hope you like that story, and I hope you're still taking good care of yourselves. You're still loving on each other and always, always loving yourselves just the way you are, because each one of you is so fantastic. And never forget, I love each one of you to the moon and back. We'll be back together for story time when we'll hear another story. Bye-bye.